Ayato is an overpowered gigachad who transfers into a magic academy but pretends to be normal. However, everything changes when he accidentally challenges the strongest girl in school and wins. Now every other baddie wants a taste of his sword. This story starts on the first day of school as Ayato walks by and sees a handkerchief falling from a window. He jumps into the window to return the handkerchief, only to find a hottie named Julius dressing up for school. The marvelous sight of her unmentionables cooks his sausage. But before he can get enough of it, Julius yells at him to turn around. After Julius is done dressing up, Ayato calmly returns the handkerchief to her, and she becomes excited because the handkerchief is important to her. She deeply thanks him for the help, but all of a sudden, she flips and decides to attack him because he saw her changing. Trying to evade her fire attacks, Ayato jumps out of the window, but the explosion draws the attention of other students. Julius accuses Ayato of peeking at her, but in Ayato's defense, he just transferred here today and didn't know he was jumping into the girls' dorm room. Julius doesn't care as she only intends to beat Ayato, so she challenges him to a duel with confidence, but Ayato is confused, and he doesn't even have a weapon. Just then, someone from the crowd tosses him a sword and prepares to defend himself. With that, the duel starts, and Julius shoots multiple flame projectiles at Ayato, which he barely manages to block. Despite that, the crowd is shocked at his performance because a normal person fighting against Julius would be toast by now. Even Julius figures that Ayato has that dog in him, so she decides to go all out on him with a nasty fireball attack. Ayato runs towards the fireball to split it in half, so Julius makes it explode at the last minute, but Ayato tanks it. He then spears Julius to the ground, and she notices he did it to save her from an arrow speeding at her. However, Ayato is now on top of her and mistakenly cops a feel of her plot, which makes everyone watching think he is Johnny Sins.
Yeah, boy.
Julius is pissed and promises to make Ayato pay for it, but that's when Claudia, the hot student council president, walks in and annuls the duel because Ayato hasn't become an official student of the academy. After that, Ayato follows Claudia to her office to get a briefing. When they reach Claudia's office, she explains that this academy rivals 4 others, which select gifted humans to compete in an annual tournament called Festas for world supremacy. Claudia knows that Ayato is quite skilled with the sword, which is why she begs him to assist in winning the tournament for the academy, and in exchange, he'll get whatever he wants. Ayato claims he isn't interested in any fancy wish as he's only in this academy to look for Haruka, his missing sister. When Claudia looks up Haruka in the database, she sees that Haruka's file has been corrupted, and the only thing she knows is that Haruka was wielding a legendary weapon called Servaresta. She adds that no one has been able to tame the weapon, but when Ayato gets interested in the Servaresta and asks to see it, Claudia promises to make it happen later. A bit later, he is introduced to his new class and is assigned Julius as his seatmate, but Julius isn't pleased with this. After class, Ayato tries to quench the bad blood between them by asking to be friends, but Julius refuses, claiming that she only owes him one for saving her life. As Julius walks away, Yabuki, Ayato's roommate, arrives and teases Ayato for getting dumped. As they leave class together, Yabuki reveals that Julius is a princess of a small country, and she's a gifted student with a rare power called Strega. Out of curiosity, Ayato asks why a princess is in this academy, and Yabuki says he has no idea. He also reveals that Julius was a social disaster because she was rude to her mates and was challenged multiple times, but she won and climbed up to the 5th-ranking student in the academy. Getting outside, they find Julius getting confronted by some dude named Lester, so they hide in the woods to see what's going to happen. Turns out, Lester wants to fight Julius, but she isn't interested because she has already beaten him 3 times in a row.
Damn.
Furious about getting rejected, Lester grabs Julius by force, which causes Julius's handkerchief to fall. Just then, Julius snaps as she shows off her true powers, explaining that she is fighting for a noble cause and doesn't have time for nonsense duels. Finally seeing her at full power, Lester wets himself while Ayato watches this in utter shock. A few years ago, Ayato was in a bad place because he beat up a bunch of dudes who badmouthed his sister and was punished by his father. While Ayato thought he was justified in beating up the younglings, Haruka reminded him that he had tremendous powers and he could hurt himself if he abused them. Ayato's pea-sized brain didn't get what she meant, so she told him he would understand when he realized his purpose in life. Ayato then asked Haruka about her purpose, and when she mentioned that she was going to protect him no matter what, he told her he would protect her, too. Presently, Ayato wakes up and heads out for an early morning run. On the way, he recalls that yesterday, he prevented Lester from fighting Julius, and Julius figured he was a tough guy pretending to look innocent. Ayato asked why she wanted to fight in the upcoming tournament, and she mentioned that she needed the prize money. Although she admitted that she doesn't have a partner yet, she claimed it was because she had not found anyone who met her standards. As she described her ideal partner, Yabuki realized she was being delusional, but left the place because he had something to do. Julius also decided to leave, but that was when Ayato asked for directions to the boys' dorm, which caused her to laugh. After she showed him the way, he asked her to give him a tour of the academy, and Julius agreed because she felt indebted to him. Presently, Ayato rounds up his early morning run and heads to class. When he greets Julius, and she responds, everyone is shocked because they believe Julius is a snub. While Julius argues that this isn't true, Ayato notices that his other seatmate is an old friend named Saya. He is surprised to see her because it's been 6 years, but he notices that the anime gods of melons and cakes ignored her growth. Saya claims that she has grown a bit, and she stands up to show that she's a few inches taller now. Ayato then asks about her father, and she reveals that he's the reason she is in this academy. Turns out, the old man created her weapon, and he wants her to use it in the tournament so it would get some exposure. She also adds that she's here on personal reasons, but when Yabuki asks what it might be, she says it's classified. All the while, Julius is a bit jealous that Ayato is getting all chatty with Saya, so after classes, she heads to the restroom to put on more makeup. When she's done, she returns and interrupts Ayato's chitty-chat session with Saya by reminding him that it's time for their tour. Saya gets suspicious of Julius and offers to show Ayato around instead, but Julius refuses because she already made a promise to Ayato. The front and back leads to an argument, but it ends when Claudia shows up and grabs Ayato, promising to give him a private tour of the school. Saya and Julius are against this and wish Claudia could get her hands off Ayato. Apparently, Claudia is here to inform Ayato that a weapon compatibility test is scheduled for tomorrow, and he'll have to sign some documents to get in. While Ayato signs the document, Julius finds it weird that Claudia is hand-delivering documents to Ayato, but Claudia brushes it off as no big deal. Ayato notices the rift between both girls and asks if they are friends, but they give opposing answers. While Claudia is cool, Julius sees her as a nuisance and wants her gone already because her melons are extra large. As Claudia leaves, Saya and Julius both agree to show Ayato around the academy. On the way, Saya acts like it's her first time in the academy, so Claudia calls her out on it, and she explains that she has issues with directions. Hearing this, Julius begins to question why she insisted on giving Ayato the tour earlier, while Ayato quickly leaves to get drinks because he knows that girls will always be girls. In his absence, Saya asks Julius about the promise she made to Ayato, which leads Julius to recount the duel they fought the previous day. During the conversation, Saya reveals that her power level is equal to Julius's, and because of that, she feels unqualified to face Ayato, believing he is far stronger than either of them. Julius, unwilling to accept this without proof, challenges Saya to test that claim for herself. Just as their duel is about to begin, 3 light arrows are fired at them, but both manage to dodge in time. Julius immediately recognizes the arrows as identical to the ones used in the earlier attack and locates the shooter, launching a magical projection in response. Before the attack can land, the archer's partner intervenes and neutralizes it, prompting Saya to deploy an advanced magical grenade launcher and eliminate both attackers in a single decisive strike. With the threat gone, she casually asks Julius if she would still like to continue the duel, but Julius declines. Ayato arrives a few minutes later and finds them drenched, with Julius visibly uncomfortable while Saya remains unfazed. The next day, Ayato meets Claudia to attend the Orga Lux weapon selection test, and on their way there, he tells her about the attack on Julius. Claudia explains that while the city has its own police force, its authority does not extend onto the school grounds. They soon reach the testing facility, where Lester is already present and attempting to qualify for an Orga Lux weapon, which requires over 80% compatibility. To Ayato's surprise, Lester is aiming for the Serveresta, the same weapon Ayato has his eye on, and the moment Ayato sees the sword, he senses something unusual about it. Lester struggles to wield it due to his low compatibility, and the harder he forces it, the more unstable it becomes, eventually turning its blade toward Ayato. Ayato initially has trouble restraining it, but on his second attempt, he subdues the Serveresta and drives it into the ground. Claudia watches in awe as his compatibility registers at 97%. Later that evening, Ayato goes to Claudia's room in the female dormitory, following her request to meet privately for details about a favor she had asked earlier. When he enters, Claudia emerges in a night robe, leaving Ayato completely shocked. After that, Claudia sits on her bed and tells Ayato to make himself feel at home, but Ayato decides to stay focused because his sword is ticking.
Yeah, boy.
He gets straight to the point and asks why she summoned him to her room, prompting Claudia to show him files on several students who were forced to withdraw from the upcoming Phoenix Festa due to injuries. As Ayato reviews the documents, he notices that their wounds match the attack Julius suffered earlier, leading Claudia to admit she suspects the same pattern but lacks concrete proof. She then reveals that the disciplinary committee is closely watching Lester MacPhail and his partner, Randy Hook, since neither of them has an alibi for the time of the previous attack. Claudia is certain of one thing, however: Julius is likely the next target. Referring back to the favor she mentioned earlier, she asks Ayato to stay close to Julius for the time being, believing that Julius may not be able to handle another ambush on her own. Curious, Ayato asks why he was chosen for the task, and Claudia explains that Julius has grown closer to him than to anyone else. When Ayato notices how personally invested Claudia seems, she responds that as student council president, protecting the academy's students is part of her responsibility. When Ayato agrees to watch over Julius, Claudia insists on rewarding him for it, but Ayato figures she wants to get cultured and decides to dip like a chicken. The following morning, Ayato meets Julius outside of school, and upon seeing her outfit, he freezes briefly in admiration before commenting on it, which makes Julius realize that the makeup course is paying off. She then begins giving him a tour of the island, starting with the arena where the Festa finals are held, and later leads him to a small restaurant for lunch. Ayato is surprised that a princess would choose such a modest place, and Julius explains that it was recommended by her friends. This catches Ayato off guard, as he had assumed she was a shut-in otaku, only for Julius to clarify that her friends are back in her home country. Eventually, Ayato steers the conversation toward her safety and warns her about the recent attempts on her life. Even so, Julius refuses to let fear control her life, insisting that she will not allow anyone else to dictate her destiny. Their conversation is interrupted when Lester arrives at the restaurant and attempts to provoke Julius, but this time Ayato steps in and challenges him to make a move. Although Lester is clearly powerful, Ayato remains unfazed by his hostility, calmly refusing to duel him and sending him away along with his companions. Once they are gone, Julius smiles and compliments Ayato on his composure. At sunset, Ayato walks through the woods with Julius, and during their stroll, she admits that she genuinely enjoyed spending time with him. Before long, she notices a group of Lay Wolf students nearby and immediately realizes she is in danger, yet she confronts them without hesitation and swiftly defeats them. Afterward, she grabs one of the students, easily recognizable by his unusual hairstyle, and interrogates him about who sent them. The student claims he does not know the mastermind's identity, only describing a tall figure dressed in black, and then points toward the woods, where he spots the person briefly. Without wasting time, Julius rushes after the suspect, forcing Ayato to follow since he is tasked with protecting her. As they run through the trees, the man in black fires a light arrow at Ayato, but it fails to harm him, allowing the attacker and his allies to escape into the forest. Julius soon reunites with Ayato, visibly worried that he might have been injured, and only relaxes after confirming he is unharmed. She then asks if he will be free later that night, and when night falls, Ayato heads to Julius's room in the female dormitory. This time, Ayato is formally invited inside, though Julius immediately tells him to take off his shirt, causing him to panic until she calmly explains that she only intends to fix the tear in it. While waiting, Ayato notices a photograph of Julius standing among several younglings and asks her about it, prompting her to explain that they are friends from her home country. She then begins recounting her past in Lizultania, where she frequently snuck out of the palace without permission to play in the city. On one such outing, she lost her way and ended up cornered in the slums by a group of thugs, only to be rescued by a group of girls who happened to be nearby. After returning to the palace, she learned that those girls were from a local orphanage, and from that point on, she began secretly meeting them whenever she could. Though she never revealed her identity as a princess, she suspected that the nuns overseeing the orphanage knew the truth. Julius also reveals that the orphanage was founded by her late mother, but that it has recently lost its funding, which is one of the main reasons she enrolled at the academy. Once she finishes repairing his shirt, Julius hands it back to Ayato and sends him home. The following day, Ayato arrives at class and notices Julius reading an unusual letter, and during lunch, she excuses herself, saying she has something to take care of. After she leaves, Claudia discovers that Julius exited the school grounds shortly after reading the letter, which immediately raises concerns about her safety. This leads Ayato to suspect that the message may have come from her previous attackers, and as he speaks with Claudia, he realizes that Julius likely left without informing him in order to protect him. The thought reminds him of a similar promise once made by his sister, snapping him back into focus and pushing him to pursue Julius. Just before he reaches the door, Claudia tosses him Haruka's former weapon, urging him to use it if a fight breaks out. Julius arrives at an abandoned building, where she's almost crushed by a falling boulder, but due to her sharp observation skills, she's able to protect herself. She is then approached by a man named Silas, who reveals himself to be the mastermind behind her mysterious attacks. Silas commends her for tracking him down, but reveals that his main objective now would be to make Ayato a target, since he has been interfering with his plans for a while now. Hearing this, Julius gets upset, as the whole reason she had tracked Silas down was so Ayato didn't become a target. Silas then promises to refrain from involving him on the condition that Julius withdraws from the Phoenix. As expected, Julius turns down his offer, telling him it won't really matter as long as she ensures that she defeats him on the spot. She then pulls out her Orga Lux and prepares for battle. Suddenly, Lester shows up, questioning why Silas would attack Julius in the first place, but Silas calmly welcomes him, as he has been expecting him. Julius tells Lester about the fact that Silas has secretly been selling them out while working with another academy, causing him to equally draw his weapon. When Lester charges at Silas to attack, a masked guy appears from nowhere and counters him, taking him completely by surprise. A couple more of them show up, revealing themselves to be mechanical dolls created by Silas. Lester tries to take all the dolls down, but he gets stopped by an exceptionally large one, which humbles him immediately. At that moment, Julius tries to help, but equally gets surrounded by more of the dolls. Not relenting, she fights back, taking down a good number of them, but eventually gets overwhelmed by their numbers. The dolls then capture her and pin her down. While Silas tries to torture her, she reveals that she has been able to figure out that the academy he's working with is Alicant. Hearing her, Silas loses interest in torturing her, so he commands one of his dolls to give her a grand exit. While the doll prepares to send her to Wonderland with a powerful attack, Ayato arrives and stops it just in time. Not only does he rescue Julius, but he also wipes out all the dolls in the room while aura farming. Seeing him, Julius tries to scold him for intervening in her affairs, but Ayato points out that he is simply fighting off his own free will. He then spews random lines about how he always wants to protect her, causing her to blush like an 8-year-old. Suddenly, Silas interrupts their session by summoning 100 more of his dolls, which immediately start to attack them. Grasping the situation, Ayato carries Julius and uses one of his power enhancement skills to evade all the attacks. He then retaliates, taking out every single doll in the room in a split second, while still carrying Julius. Astonished, Silas panics as he summons a different set of dolls to attack, but Ayato figures out their attack patterns in no time and takes them out. Now sweating in his drawers, Silas uses his trump card, which happens to be a Tangent-sized doll. The doll looks really powerful, but when it comes close enough, our boy shows it who's boss by deciphering it into tiny bits. Seeing that he has been defeated, Silas uses one of his doll's corpses to fly out of the building, so he can keep his precious life. Seeing him escape, Ayato considers putting Julius down and going after him, but she tells him there's no need to. She then uses one of her special skills, which gives them wings and boosts them into the sky. Thanks to the skill, they're able to catch up with Silas. Ayato then destroys the doll, causing him to fall from an immense height. Given that Silas is a Genestella, he survives the fall, but he meets himself in the company of Claudia, who had positioned herself in the area for him. Together, Ayato and Julius decide to stay in the sky to enjoy the beautiful view of the sunset, but Ayato suddenly feels an immense pain in his chest, causing him to pass out. Turns out the pain is a result of some circular shackles his sister had used to imprison his salvage force years ago. A few moments later, Ayato wakes up on Julius's lap atop a building. He feels embarrassed and tries to get up immediately, but Julius keeps him steady, insisting that he has to rest. He thanks her for saving him, but she insists that he's the one who should be thanked for saving her in the first place. She asks about the restriction spell, so Ayato is forced to tell her about his sister. She asks why his sister would cast a spell on him that would prevent him from using his full power for a long period of time, but he answers that he has no idea as well. He reveals that he equally wants to find out why, but can't because she has been missing for 5 years now. Ayato randomly asks if Julius would be willing to accept him as her partner for the Phoenix. She tries to turn down the request as she wouldn't want him to end up in the same pathetic state after using his powers, but he assures her that he'll be fine as long as he can protect her always. Hearing this, Julius blushes uncontrollably, as she has never met someone with so much game in her entire life. Meanwhile, while Silas tries to escape from Claudia, she catches up to him easily and gives him a fatal injury for his crime. Yabuki, who has been hidden in the shadows the whole time, then reveals himself and takes over matters with Silas. Unknown to them, some students from Alicant appear to be monitoring them through a nearby security camera while planning their next course of action. One morning, Claudia attends a meeting of student council presidents to plan the events of the Phoenix. At the start of the meeting, the representatives notice the absence of one of the student council presidents, who had apparently gone on a European tour. While Dirk, one of the presidents, makes harsh comments about the absent president, Ernest, the anchor, gets offended, so he almost gets into a fight with him. But they both get stopped by Xinglu, who threatens to get physical with them. Resuming the meeting, the council discusses the development of new Lux as well as the integration of artificial intelligence in Seducan and Alicant. The following morning, Ayato, who has a scheduled training with Julius, runs late, so he rushes to school while imagining the kind of punishment Julius would put him through. While rushing, he bumps into a girl with an impressive rack, named Kieran. He immediately helps her up and tries to apologize, but a much older man summons her immediately. Later that day, during his training session with Julius, she emphasizes testing Ayato's limit to see how long he can last. After preparing a conservative series of small attacks, Ayato evades them completely and charges at her. Little did he know he was only playing into her hands. Just like she anticipated, he accidentally steps into a trap she prepared beforehand, causing it to explode on him. But just before she starts jubilating, Ayato breaks out of it easily, showing her why he's the protagonist. He then wins the duel easily by holding his weapon against her blind spot. After the duel, Julius sulks a little, as she had hoped to beat him this time, but Ayato comforts her, telling her he's just that guy. He commends the tricks she used, telling her they would definitely work on other people, but just not him. Thanks to the duel, they're both able to figure out that Ayato can only fight at his full power for just 3 minutes. He doesn't see it as a problem, since he doesn't expect many candidates to be strong enough to push him to that extent. But Julius calls his bluff immediately. She tells him that there are currently over 20 candidates who are more powerful than herself and would likely be up to the task, including some of the student council presidents. Hearing this, Ayato realizes he just underestimated the participants' abilities. He then randomly recalls Ophelia, a student he heard about, who became the second person in history to win 2 successive Lindworm Festas. When he mentions her, Julius immediately gets moody, but she tries to hide it. She tells Ayato that since his skills are not well known yet, it might become public knowledge that he's wielding the Servaresta. She then suggests that since knowing the sword's power isn't enough to help, it would be more ideal if he used it without undoing his seal. She also specifically warns him not to go around showing his hand in any useless duels, as they have only 1 month to the Phoenix. Shortly after, Saya and Lester, who had recently been discharged from the hospital, show up in the training room. When they arrive, Saya lays all forms of accusations on Julius, claiming that she locked herself alone with Ayato so that she could do freaky stuff with him, but Julius lashes back at her to defend herself. Meanwhile, Lester thanks Ayato for saving him the other day from Silas. Soon, Claudia joins them in the training room with 2 new faces, whom she introduces as Ernesta and Camilla from Alicante Academy. She then talks about the joint venture the 2 academies are about to embark upon. Julius then realizes that because they didn't charge Alicante with the Silas incident, they were able to secure their technological collaboration with Seducan. Still, she doesn't understand why Claudia brought 2 representatives. When she asks about it, Ernest snaps, pointing out that it's because she wanted to come and see Ayato for herself. She starts teasing him, making Saya and Julius jealous to the point where they draw their weapons. Seeing Saya's weapon, Camilla can figure out that she's the daughter of the renowned Dr. Sasamiya, but she criticizes the weapon, pointing out that it has a lot of downsides and upsetting Saya in the process. Camilla then proceeds to tell her about how her father had been cast out of Alicante for his perverse experiments. While Camilla tries to leave, Saya demands that she retract her statements about her father, but she refuses. Ernest then tells her that Camilla would only listen to her if she could defeat her with the weapon, and that since the Phoenix is coming up soon, she'll be looking forward to seeing them fight. When they leave, Saya, who didn't want to fight in the Phoenix before, suddenly changes her mind. Since it's a tag team tournament, she requests that Ayato be her partner, but Julius stands against her immediately, stating that she has already claimed him. The 2 girls then get into a squabble about who deserves to be Ayato's partner. Meanwhile, on their way back to their academy, Camilla asks what Ernest thinks of Ayato, but she replies that she still needs to gather more intel before she makes a decision. It's then clear that she has a plan of her own. While walking to class the following morning with Yabuki, Ayato sees the elderly man from last time hitting Kieran, so he's forced to intervene. When he gets there, he introduces himself as Toto, Kieran's uncle, requesting that Ayato butt out of family matters, but Ayato insists that it's not proper to hit a girl. When Toto finds out that Ayato has a Servaresta, he becomes interested, so he agrees to listen to him, but on the condition that he defeats Kieran in a duel. Because of the intimidation of her uncle, Kieran initiates the duel, but suggests that Ayato decline, so he doesn't get hurt. But as expected, our washed-up Ayato is always itching to play the role of good guy, so he accepts the duel. When the duel begins, Kieran proves to be a lot stronger and faster than Ayato imagined, putting him on edge. After fighting for a while, Ayato realizes that he'll soon be out of time, so he changes his battle strategy and focuses on ending things with a single blow. But to his surprise, Kieran catches on to his strategy and retaliates. A few seconds later, she slices his school emblem in 2, ending the duel instantly. Kieran then apologizes and leaves with Toto once more. Julius, who had arrived shortly towards the end of the duel, scolds Ayato not only for publicly pushing himself towards his limit, but for carelessly getting into a duel against Kieran, their rank #1 student. After gaining enough distance from the rest of the students, Todo scolds Kieran for taking too long to defeat Ayato. He calls her a weak-willed brat whose only skill is swordmanship, emphasizing that she has to do way better for his grand plan to become reality. Meanwhile, Julia reveals to Ayato that she's really mad, but not for the reason he thinks. She's upset because of how Todo has been using Kieran as a tool. She then reveals that if Ayato hadn't stood up to him the way he did, then she'd have been mad at him as well. Hearing this, Ayato thanks her, but she immediately gets flustered as she tells him she didn't do anything worthy of his thanks. She then reveals that the main reason she got mad was that Ayato lost. She had hoped that if anyone in the academy would be able to defeat Kieran, it would have been Ayato, but seeing him get him whooped publicly, she then realizes the power gap. She shares that there are only 3 people she can't defeat in the academy, and they are him, Claudia, and Kieran. Ayato is shocked to learn that Claudia happens to be the #2 strongest in their academy. Julius then reveals that, despite being strong already, Claudia wields an Orga Lux, which enables her to see up to 10 seconds into the future, making her practically impossible to defeat, just like Kieran. She then points out that the key difference between them is that, unlike Claudia, Kieran doesn't wield an Ogre Lux, nor is she a Strega, but in just 3 months, she was able to redeem her #1 ranking with only a Japanese sword. Thereon, she tells Ayato that because he already publicly showed his hand, they're going to have to come up with a new strategy to participate in the Phoenix. Later that day, Ayato heads to the faculty to pick up a new school emblem. When he gets there, he meets Claudia in a bikini, relaxing in front of a pool. He then tries his best to distract his mind so his Johnson doesn't get curious. Claudia hands him a new emblem, but shares that she never thought Ayato would duel Kieran. She then proceeds to tell him about how Todo has been trying to monopolize power, so he can claim a spot on the executive board in the academy. Ayato points out that that's probably why he's forcing Kieran to fight, but Claudia reveals that Kieran seems to have her own reason for fighting. He asks how she knows so much, and Claudia reveals that her mother is an executive. When Ayato gets back to his dorm that evening, he sees a bit of a crowd at the entrance. Getting close enough, he then finds out that Kieran had come to visit him. Taking her to the reception room, Kieran thanks him genuinely for standing up for her. She claims that even though he lost the duel, it still made her really happy, as no one has ever done anything like that for her. After a while, Ayato realizes that the boys in the dorm are trying to eavesdrop on them, so he takes her out. While walking her back to her dorm, they chat about each other's swordsmanship styles while referring to their battles. When Ayato then asks what Kieran seems to be fighting for, he's surprised that she's also trying to save her father. But he still doesn't see it as a valid reason for her uncle to use her for his career purposes. Still, she tells him not to worry, as Todo has simply chosen the quickest way for her to get to her goal. When Kieran reveals that she had been training all by herself ever since she got to the academy, Ayato considers making her join his training sessions with Julius, but then he realizes that she might not be cool with it. He then suggests that she join his personal early morning sessions. Excited, Kieran jumps on the offer. When he drops her off at her dorm, Silas shows up from nowhere and starts interrogating him about his intentions with Kieran. He then reveals that just like her, she's also fighting so she can help her father. Before he leaves, he turns down Silas's offer to be his partner, stating that he has already promised to team up with Julius. A couple of days later, during lunchtime at the cafeteria, Julius confronts Ayato, asking about the rumors she has been hearing about him and Kieran. Ayato then confirms that they have been training together every morning. Flustered, Julius accidentally places an order for the wrong food. Ayato then ends up swapping food with her to make her feel better. Very early the following morning, while Ayato trains with Kieran, Camilla and Ernest decide to interfere by sending a couple of monsters to attack them. While the monsters charge at them, Ayato uses his weapon to take them down, but he notices something strange afterwards. Each monster he cuts turns into a slime and regenerates. Seeing this, Kieran decides to take a different approach, cutting one of the monsters into tiny bits until its core becomes visible. She then destroys the core, defeating it in the process. Seeing how she has taken down one of them, the rest of the monsters make a swift escape immediately. When Ayato picks up the core, he identifies it as a creation of Alicant, but before he can react, a different set of monsters appears and starts firing attacks at them. In their quest to escape, they both end up falling into a pit. As Ayato and Kieran fall into the hole, Ernesto watches on, unimpressed by Tenorio's monsters, but Camilla assures her that the next one is the real deal. In a waterway at the bottom of the hole, Ayato surfaces, supporting Kieran, who cannot swim. Then he looks around the underground structure and remarks that it is large, but Kieran freaks out, thinking he is checking out her melons. Before he can explain himself, a dragon-like creature emerges from the depths, so Ayato activates his sword, lifting his seal just in time to block its attack. The dragon circles them, preparing to strike again, and Kieran begs Ayato to leave her behind, but Ayato reassures her to leave it to him and not call herself a burden. Ayato carves out a gap in one of the waterway's pillars and helps Kieran climb on. Then the creature goes on the attack again, but Ayato slices its head clean off. The creature's head starts regenerating like the other monsters, so Ayato asks Kieran to locate the creature's core, but she tells him that the core keeps moving around its body. Ayato reveals that he has a move he can try out, since the Serveresta can handle more of his power, so he lifts his seal, cuts through the dragon's fire blasts, and splits the dragon down the middle, destroying its core. As the dragon starts to disintegrate, Ayato screams in pain as his seal manifests again, knocking him out cold. When Ayato regains consciousness, they hang out their clothes to dry, and he explains to Kieran that he can only fight at full power for 5 minutes. Kieran asks why Ayato keeps pushing himself and gets jealous when he mentions fighting by Julis's side, so when she asks if he's in love with Julis, he says it's not like that. Feeling hopeful that she has a chance, Kieran moves closer to Ayato. Then Ayato also asks Kieran why she fights, and she confesses that she wants to save her father, who was convicted as a criminal. 5 years ago, a robber invaded a store where Kieran and her father were in and took Kieran hostage, so her father eliminated the criminal, and even though it was supposed to be considered self-defense, her father was imprisoned because he was a Genestella. Back in the present, Kieran blames herself for being scared when she could have defeated the robber herself, and explains that without action, her father faces decades in prison, so when her uncle offered help, she had no choice but to obey. Ayato warns Kieran that following someone else's path leads to a dead end, but when she asks how she could possibly do it alone, he pats her on the head and promises to help her. Kieran turns around to look at Ayato, but accidentally flashes her unmentionables, making him avert his eyes and battle his inner demons. Finally, the rescue team arrives and extracts them from the waterway, and moments later, Tudu scolds Kieran for worrying him and starts discussing her next opponent. Kieran interrupts him, asking if he was worried about her as a person or as a tool, and Tudu replies that he is only interested in her power. He then orders Kieran to distance herself from Ayato and his troubles, but Kieran blatantly refuses. Tudu slaps her and reminds her that he is responsible for all her accomplishments, so Kieran acknowledges his help but rejects following him anymore. Tudu tries to punch her, but Kieran catches his fist, squeezes it as a warning, and starts to walk away. Tudu then questions how Kieran intends to maintain her top rank on her own, and Kieran says she'll start by dueling Ayato to kick off her journey down her own path. At the arena, Kieran thanks Ayato for accepting her challenge, explaining that the duel signifies her first genuine step in Asterisk, so Ayato promises to give his all. Kieran asks why he isn't wielding the Serveresta, and he explains that it can't keep up with her speed, so he has to switch things up if he wants to win this time. Backstage, Julis worries about Ayato, and Sakamiya assures her that Ayato has faced a more powerful opponent before, which was his sister. Lester mentions that Ayato has a plan because he borrowed his Ogre Lux, and Yabuki adds that Ayato borrowed his too. Then the match begins with Kieran immediately going on the attack. Kieran unleashes high-speed sword skills, and Ayato barely deflects her offensive and creates distance between them with his counterswing. Kieran remarks that he is the first person to withstand her special skills, then she declares that she will finish Ayato off with her next move, but Ayato powers up and prepares to go all out himself. Ayato parries Kieran's strikes and deploys a smokescreen. Then a confused Kieran retreats and deflects some energy projectiles fired at her from the smoke. Ayato then emerges out of the smoke with a spear, so Kieran blocks his spear attacks and closes in on him, declaring that his tricks don't mean anything. As she reaches the spear's ineffective range, Ayato claims that he has more tricks up his sleeve. Then he tosses his spear at her and pulls out 2 daggers. Kieran knocks the blades from Ayato's grip and launches skyward, attempting her ultimate skill, but Ayato spots an opening, grabs her, and suplexes her into the ground, securing victory. After Ayato is declared victorious, Julis and Sakamiya welcome him backstage. Then Kieran enters and requests to take Ayato up on his previous offers to join their training sessions. Julis side-eyes Ayato for handing out invitations without her permission. Then Sakamiya approves Kieran's request, making Julis lose it because Sakamiya was never invited either. As Sakamiya tells Julis to give up and follow the flow of the universe, Tudo pounds on the entrance demanding access to Kieran, so Kieran permits his entry. Tudo shouts at Kieran for not following his orders and losing the duel. Then he tries to grab her hand, but Kieran rejects him, saying that she decided to follow her own path. As Tudo raises his arm to strike Kieran, Ayato catches his arm and tells him to buzz off, but he threatens to stop covering for Kieran's father and to expose his secrets. Claudia intervenes, threatening to inform her mother about Tudo's scheme to damage a student's reputation for personal gain, so Tudo almost pisses his pants and turns to leave. As Tudo exits the room, Kieran genuinely thanks him for his help, but he leaves without a word, so Ayato approaches Kieran and welcomes her on board. Then she thanks him and nervously asks to be on a first-name basis. At a lab in Alican, Camilla and Ernesta test their new puppets on some students. Then Ernesta excitedly mentions that while the Tenorio faction lost their standing, she was able to get data on Ayato's battle with the monsters, eliminating 2 birds with 1 stone. Back at Saidukan, Sakamiya approaches Kieran and suggests that since they are both fighting for their father's sakes, they should team up for the Phoenix Festa. Sakamiya and Kieran work together to take down some training bots, but they end up with a low coordination score. Then they link up with Ayato, Yabuki, and Julius in the cafeteria. Some random girl approaches Ayato, asking for his autograph and wishing him good luck in the upcoming tournament, and once she gets what she came for, the girls start side-eyeing Ayato for entertaining females outside their circle. Yabuki steps in to explain that the attention is expected since Ayato is the mystery student who took down a top-ranked fighter. Yabuki reminds them about the commotion Julius had caused when she suddenly elevated to page 1, so Julius argues that the hype around her died down a lot sooner. Julius explains that she would rather turn down the fans than get used for their personal gain. Then she debits Ayato's Aura Bank by showing him an auction website where his autograph is already up for sale. Sakamiya cheers him up by saying he has real fans like her, and Kieran chimes in that he has fans in her class as well, not to mention herself. Julius asks them if they'll still be fans if they're paired against her and Ayato for the Phoenix Festa, and Sakamiya says that she'll bring all the firepower she has. Ayato admits he was shocked when he found out that Sakamiya had paired with Kieran for the Phoenix Festa, so Sakamiya explains that she needed to get a partner to qualify for the competition so that she could make Camilla eat her disrespectful words against her father's weapons. Kieran adds that she agreed because she genuinely wanted to compete, not because she felt forced. Then Julius mocks the girls for having 0 teamwork, unlike Ayato and her. Ayato chips in and advises Kieran and Sakamiya to work on their cooperation, so Sakamiya announces that they won't be training with the group tomorrow, since they'll be bonding instead. The following day, Sakamiya admits she has no idea how to bond with people and asks Kieran if she knows how, but Kieran nervously confesses she's just as hopeless at the bonding stuff. Sakamiya suggests doing something together and settles on shopping for a birthday present for her dad, so she asks Kieran to help her out since she is directionally challenged. After a few visits to different shops, the girls are unable to choose a proper present for Sakamiya's father because he apparently likes nothing, so they retrace their steps back to where they came from. Kieran asks what Sakamiya's father is like, and Sakamiya describes him as basically a mad scientist, which suddenly gives her the perfect gift idea. Sakamiya shows Kieran a point on the city's map, and Kieran says that she can reach the location, although the place lies outside the normal business district. The girls end up in some dodgy back alley with sketchy-looking dudes, but Sakamiya rolls through like she has the streets in her. When they finally reach a weapons shop, Kieran freaks out on hearing that it's illegal, but Sakamiya just starts geeking out over a rare gun with a broken generator. After Sakamiya finishes fangirling over how good a bargain she got from the shop, she asks Kieran what activity she'd like to do, and with some encouragement, Kieran makes her choice. At an indoor pool, Sakamiya is teaching Kieran how to swim, and she suddenly asks Kieran why she didn't ask Ayato to teach her, but Kieran loses her balance and almost drowns at the mention of Ayato's name. Once Kieran catches her breath, Sakamiya apologizes for almost casually unaliving her, and Kieran explains that she doesn't want Ayato to see her weak side. Sakamiya praises her for being brave before stepping away to grab drinks, and while Kieran is practicing solo, she crashes into a blonde girl floating on a raft. The blonde starts going off on Kieran, and even challenges her to a duel until she clocks that Kieran is the rank 1 from Seidukan Academy, and starts becoming humble. Sakamiya then explains that she is no longer rank 1 and can't swim properly, so the blonde starts running her mouth again until Sakamiya shows up and shuts her up by chucking a swimming board at her face. The blonde jumps out of the pool, fuming and demanding to know who just violated her face, so Sakamiya reveals herself and the blonde mocks her for being a rankless nobody. Sakamiya asks the blonde to apologize to her partner. Instead, the blonde girl introduces herself as Violet Weinberg, rank 35 from Queenvale Academy, and challenges Sakamiya to a duel while literally walking on water. Sakamiya looks completely uninterested in Violet's flex and tells her to hurry up and fight, and as the duel kicks off, Sakamiya immediately summons a huge gun and blasts Violet into next week. Later that evening, Sakamiya asks Kieran why she kept taking the insults from the blonde girl, and Kieran admits that she may still be used to the way her uncle used to treat her. Sakamiya then tells Kieran to stop being a doormat and take some pride in herself because she has many good qualities, so Kieran thanks her for the advice. Kieran then asks why Sakamiya picked her as a partner, and Sakamiya explains that aside from Kieran's combat skills, the fact that she uses the same sword style as Ayato means they'd work well together. The following day, Kieran and Sakamiya go back to the training room and start taking apart the bots like they can read each other's thoughts. As Ayato and Julius watch Kieran and Sakamiya's training, they wonder what miracle they performed in just a day, because their coordination score is now higher than theirs. Later that night in the student council room, Yabuki informs Claudia that Sakamiya's team is coming along great, which is a relief since Claudia needs them to perform well. When Yabuki asks about the Phoenix Festa matchups, Claudia shows him the bracket, leading him to remark on the large number of participants this year. He quickly notices that Julius's team and Sakamiya's team are placed in different blocks, meaning they won't have to face each other until the finals. Curious about their odds, Yabuki asks if either team actually has a shot at winning, but Claudia explains that, unlike previous years, there are no clear favorites this time around. Yabuki recalls how the competition was on another level last year, but notes that their school might actually have a shot this time. However, Claudia warns that they won't easily get past Alicant or the Leywolf competitor Irene Urzaze, who wields the Gravy Scythe Ogre Lux. A few days before the Festa, Leywolf's student council president, Dirk Eberwein, releases a sketchy inmate from the school's prison and orders her to compete in the Phoenix Festa. He instructs her to eliminate Ayato during the competition before his Ogre Lux becomes an even bigger headache. The inmate, Irene Urzaze, then agrees to do as instructed, on the condition that her sister remains protected, and Dirk promises to keep her sister safe. During the opening ceremony of the Phoenix Festa, Ayato notices the president of the Festa committee, Maddie Mesa, while he is making an opening speech and asks Julius what she knows about him. Julius explains that Madieth is a crafty Seducan alumnus who won a Phoenix Festa and requested to join the Festa committee. Then Ayato feels Madieth staring at him, but wonders if he is imagining things. The sus president announces new rules lifting the ban on AI weapons and allowing contestants to swap with each other during a match. Madieth claims that he isn't trying to give an advantage to any academy, but is trying to preserve the quality of the tournaments going forward, and then he kicks off the Festa. Ayato and Julius decide to grab lunch since there is still time before the match. Then Ayato sees Lester and tries to invite him, but he angrily declines. Lester tells Ayato that he isn't trying to join his harem and wants to fight against him and Julius. Then he warns him not to lose until then. Sakamiya then pops up from nowhere and clings to Ayato, and Kieran nervously shows up offering Ayato a lunchbox. She and Sakamiya prepared to wish him good luck. Julius gets jealous as she watches Ayato shower the girls with attention for their waifu skills, so she storms off to the waiting room so the rest of the group will have to come along. After eating, Ayato switches on a live broadcast of the competition, where a commentator reads the rules of the game. Then Kieran asks about Ayato and Julius's first opponents. Ayato explains that the opponents are from Garenworth, and when Kieran asks if they have a plan, Julius tells her that they don't have any and that she should watch and be amazed. The commentators introduce Ayato and Julius as the second match begins, hyping Ayato as the Seducan Rank 1 and the main event. While Ayato is busy fighting back tears of nervousness, Julius's fanboys go absolutely wild at her introduction, and she handles the spotlight like a pro. The auto-referee signals to start the match, and when Julius sees their opponents charging forward, she walks away to let Ayato handle business. Ayato temporarily breaks free from his seal, activates his Serveresta Ogre Lux sword, and cuts through the badges of his two opponents in one swing. Once the team is announced as the winner, the crowd goes wild while the commentators rave over Ayato's flashy performance. On the way to the waiting room, Julius reveals that she stayed out of the fight specifically to conceal their teamwork patterns, and she even commends Ayato's acting during his seal-breaking stunt. She then reminds him to keep that same energy during press interviews so their true trump cards stay hidden until the finals. Yabuki links up with the winners in the waiting room, and Ayato asks if he came to cheer them on, but he says that he came for the match 3's contestants from Alicant. Sakamiya then gets excited, thinking that he has information on Alicant, but Yabuki reveals that they chased him away when he tried to get information on them. Yabuki then says that it's better to just see them in person, but Julius knows that he just wants to tag along, so he can get in using their contestants' pass. The commentators announce the arrival of the Alicant contestants, who are AI puppets, to the ring. Then they give a rundown about combat puppets, until they receive information on the AI puppets sent to them by Ernesta. Backstage, Camilla is pissed at Ernesta for spilling information on the puppets, but Ernesta just shrugs it off, explaining she doesn't want anyone whining that they only won because of the sudden rule change. Even though Camilla worries the leak will cost them the match, Ernesta just laughs and promises that their victory is already a done deal. The commentators reveal to the audience that the puppets in the ring are new models named Artie and Rimsey, and will represent the Alicante contestants throughout their time in the Phoenix Festa. In the ring, one of the puppets, Artie, offers his Lay Wolf opponents a 1-minute head start to try whatever attacks they may have, and it won't lift a finger. The Lay Wolf contestants feel violated and get ready to break Artie's legs, but they stop in their tracks when Artie gets shot in the head by his puppet teammate, Rimsey. Rimsey starts verbally violating Artie for being faulty scrap metal, but he explains that the head start will show everyone how great their master is, so Rimsey jumps on board and decides not to launch any attacks for a full minute. The Lay Wolf team leader accepts the insulting offer, and the auto referee kicks off the match, and during the 1-minute grace, the Lay Wolf team leader chooses to fight Artie while his partner faces Rimsey. The team leader activates his special move, where his hand turns into a huge wind drill. Then he tries to attack Artie with the wind drill, but Artie's auto barrier blocks the attack. The team leader keeps trying to get through, but the auto barrier blocks everything while Artie mockingly counts down to a minute. Seeing that he's getting nowhere, the team leader calls for his partner, but the partner hasn't even defeated Rimsey, because every bullet the partner fires at Rimsey, it shoots it out of the air. Artie keeps counting down, and the team leader starts dreading the end of his head start, so he unleashes his maximum power to create a giant tornado drill and launches it at Artie, but it doesn't get past the auto barrier. He then starts screaming, hoping for a Super Saiyan transformation, but his tornado drill bounces off the auto barrier and vanishes, and he collapses from exhaustion. Artie announces that the head start is over, summons a giant sledgehammer, and eliminates the Lay Wolf contestants, so the commentator declares Ernesta and Camilla the winners of the match. The crowd goes wild, cheering for the utter humiliation of the Lay Wolf dudes, and Ayato watches on, wondering how he's supposed to fight the Alicante AI puppets without losing aura in front of his girls. Sakamaya receives a call from her father, who informs her that the puppets are AI-powered, and Ayato recognizes Sakamaya's father's voice and says hello to him. Her father asks Sakamaya if she has received the new gun he shipped to her, but Sakamaya says it hasn't arrived yet, and when he asks her to check customs, Sakamaya insists her current gun is more than enough. After hanging up, Sakamaya excuses herself to check customs as her father suggested, and Kieran eagerly tags along. Then Yabuki tells Ayato and Julius he wants to sneak into the winner's press conference for information. With everyone else gone, Ayato and Julius decide to squeeze in some training. Meanwhile, over in Alicante's waiting room, Ernesta is excitedly praising her puppets for their performance. Rimsey bows to Ernesta and thanks her for the kind words, demanding that he show proper respect to their master. After Rimsey lets him off the hook, Artie asks Ernesta why his partner is able to dominate him so easily when they were built with the same specs. Ernesta feeds him a line, claiming he was modeled after males who optimize their energy while females function at maximum output, but she's actually lying, as Rimsey serves as his built-in limiter. On their way to the arena, Ayato and Julius stop to investigate a street fight where Julius recognizes the fighter as Irene Erzais, a Page 1 student from Lay Wolf, and after knocking out her last opponent, Irene spots Ayato's face and walks toward him, smiling like a serial killer. Julius stands protectively in front of Ayato and asks Irene what business she has with him, but Irene tells Julius to take a hike because she has no interest in her. When Julius warns that street fighting is reckless and could get her disqualified from the Phoenix Festa, Irene just doubles down and activates her Ogre Lux, forcing Julius and Ayato to dash backwards instinctively. As Irene is about to cook, a young voice calls out and makes her visibly nervous. Then Priscilla, Irene's beloved little sister, appears and apologizes to the group for her thug sister's behavior. Priscilla forces Irene to apologize and promises to scold her properly later, so after Priscilla drags her sister away, Julius mentions the limited information Claudia provided about the sister duo. Ayato asks why Julius provoked Irene earlier, so Julius explains Irene clearly targeted Ayato since she ignored everyone else. Julius adds that La Wolf Academy has a reputation for shady activities and might be plotting against Seidukan. Then, they receive an alert that Kieran and Sakamaya's match is about to begin. The commentator begins the introductions but mistakes Sakamaya for Kieran due to her lack of development, even blurting out that Sakamaya is screwed if she's still flat as a board. As the audience starts laughing at Sakamaya, she just stands there debating whether she should use the audience for target practice. The match begins, and Kieran immediately picks out the shorter opponent to engage in a high-speed, close-range battle. Then after just a few exchanges, she slices through his badge so fast that the commentator goes crazy over how soon her battle ended. The second commentator draws attention to Sakamiya as she flawlessly defends against her opponent's strikes at close range. Then she suddenly shifts to the offensive and starts swinging her massive gun like a sword. Seeing Sakamiya begin to power up her weapon, the opponent charges and leaps into the air for a desperate finishing move, but she simply blasts him into Tuesday, and the announcers declare her and Kieran victorious while the crowd celebrates. After the match, Kieran and Sakamiya take a bath, where Sakamiya explains that her gun generates an energy field that makes it withstand attacks from actual offensive weapons. Kieran asks Sakamiya how she can fight at close range, and she explains that she watched and learned, although Ayato also taught her a little. After bathing, Sakamiya wanders straight into the waiting room completely unplotted without even bothering to dry off, so a panicked Kieran rushes after her to try and cover her up. Sakamiya ignores her help and gets jealous that Kieran is more developed than her, so she decides to investigate the difference with her hands until Julius and Ayato call from the hallway. Sakamiya tells them to come in without thinking twice, and when Ayato walks into the room and sees both of them totally unplotted, his brain short-circuits, and Kieran lets out a scream that echoes through the entire Phoenix Festa. In the second round of the Festa, Ayato and Julius face two girls from Queenvale, and Julius volunteers to fight solo since Ayato carried their first match. The girls charge at her, working together, so Julius creates multiple fireballs and launches them at the girls. While dodging and blocking the fireballs, one girl twists her ankle and stumbles into a direct hit that destroys her badge. The second girl mocks Julius after dodging all of her fireballs, but Julius traps her and drops a giant fireball on her head. The commentators are impressed by Julius' tactics and announce her and Ayato as the winners of the match, so they rack up another easy win and head to the waiting room. While they await Kieran and Sakamiya's return, Julius presents her packed lunch to Ayato and nervously asks him to pat her head as he does to Sakamiya and Kieran. After Ayato awkwardly pats her head, Julius gets embarrassed and fumbles around to open a screen showing the ongoing matches, where in the ring, Lester and his partner Randy circle their opponents, Irene and Priscilla, who stand ready with their weapons drawn. Lester and Randy initially plan to drag out the fight to amplify the side effects of Irene's weapon, so they keep running to buy time. Then Randy decides to test Priscilla's limits, but Irene slams her Lux down and spikes the gravity around Randy. Lester tries to capitalize and attacks Irene, but she easily blocks his axe and kicks him away, so Randy passes out from the crushing gravitational pressure while Lester struggles to drag himself back up to his feet. Lester unleashes a massive technique that sends Irene crashing into the arena walls, but she tanks it and walks toward her sister, biting into Priscilla's neck to drain energy directly from her bloodstream, while Priscilla's wound immediately heals back up. Irene explains that while her weapon normally consumes the wielder's blood, absorbing the blood of others compensates for the cost, so a disgusted Lester calls her a vampire. Irene creates 3 ominous gravity orbs and launches them at Lester while increasing the gravitational pull around his position. Then Lester manages to dodge the first one and attempts to split the remaining 2 with his axe, but the blade shatters against the pressure. Unable to move or fight back, Lester finally collapses under the immense gravitational force and surrenders the match. Claudia congratulates Ayato for making it to the finals and immediately starts trying to get him in the mood, but Ayato's device rings and Kieran pops up on the screen to nervously inform him that Sakamiya has gotten lost, so Ayato excuses himself from Claudia's clutches and promises to make up for it later. While searching the city for Sakamiya, Ayato bumps into Priscilla while she is being pursued by a group of thugs, and when the thugs demand that he hand her over, he decides to take off running with her instead. Once they reach safety, Ayato questions why the thugs were after her, so Priscilla begins explaining that her sister might have stirred up trouble at the casino before stopping herself and insisting that Irene is actually a good person. Priscilla mentions that her sister is already on her way to save her, and just as Ayato begins to freak out internally, Irene suddenly shows up looking ready to detach his head from his body. Priscilla tries to explain that Ayato was actually helping her, but Irene refuses to listen until Priscilla finally gets pissed and demands that she calm down, causing Irene to promise that she'll behave. Irene asks Ayato what he was doing in the area, but before Ayato can respond, he gets a call from Sakamiya, informing him that she has finally found her way back to Kieran. Ayato suggests meeting at the burger place before explaining that he came to the area while searching for a friend, so Irene reluctantly apologizes for overreacting and hands him the final match schedule to call it even. Later that day, Irene smashes through Le Wolf's president's office wall to confront Dirk Eberwein on why her sister wasn't protected according to their agreement. Dirk calmly states not all students follow his commands, but Irene doesn't care for his excuse and asks why the cats weren't assigned to protect Priscilla. Dirk coldly mentions that a few scratches mean nothing since Priscilla has regenerative blood, so Irene snaps and attacks the president but only manages to leave a scratch on his cheek. As Irene realizes that Dirk was protected by the cats, he reminds Irene who will benefit the least if he is eliminated. Then he adds that the cats couldn't move to protect Priscilla because of Ayato's intervention, and Irene blames the president for making her indebted to Ayato. After Irene leaves, the president instructs his frightened assistant, Corona, to perform a reading, and Corona, whose Genestella gift is fortune-telling, does her reading and excitedly reports that her cards show Irene and Priscilla's victory. At Seidukan, Ayato informs Julius that he has dinner plans with Irene and her sister, and Julius wonders why he's trying to unalive himself by walking into an obvious trap, so Julius decides to join Ayato. When they reach the apartment, Priscilla welcomes them in, and Irene just acknowledges their existence, so Julius and Irene start bickering, until Priscilla enters the room with the food. Over dinner, Irene hypes Priscilla's cooking, like she was the one who prepared it. Then Ayato commends their home, and Irene says it's convenient, since it is located close to the casino. Irene then reveals that she gambles like crazy because she needs a lot of money, but Julius asks why she doesn't just win the money from the Phoenix Festa. As Priscilla exits the room, Irene reveals that she borrowed a massive amount of money from Dirk Eberwein and has been following his orders to slowly pay off her debt, and that her contract restricts her from participating in the Festa. Julius then asks why she is currently in the Festa, and she reveals that Dirk ordered her to eliminate Ayato because his ogre Lux, Sir Veresta, is a threat and he wants it destroyed. Julius asks Irene why Dirk would go that far over a simple weapon, and Irene informs her that, according to what she has heard from Dirk, he's seen someone else wield the same ogre Lux. Ayato suddenly recalls Claudia telling him about his sister's disappearance and connects the dots, so he thanks Irene for the information, and Priscilla enters the room with more food. After dinner, Priscilla apologizes to Ayato and Julius for her sister's general lack of manners, but Julius says that it doesn't matter, since their teams will be fighting tomorrow. Priscilla mentions she's grateful her sister fights for her, and would do anything to help, but Irene becomes a more frightening and different person each time she wields her ogre Lux. Priscilla catches herself and apologizes for oversharing, and as Julius and Ayato head home, she asks if she's having unnecessary compassion because of what he heard. Ayato admits that he may be thinking about it, so she reminds him that they need to ignore whatever tragic backstory they heard and focus on reaching the finals. Then after separating for their dorms, Ayato decides to visit Claudia. As Ayato is allowed into Claudia's house, she suddenly goes berserk and attacks Ayato, and as she is about to eliminate him, Ayato calls out to her, and she regains control. Claudia apologizes for almost unaliving Ayato, and when Ayato asks her what made her berserk, Claudia promises to tell him if he agrees to join her tag team in next year's Griffin Festa. Ayato accepts with the condition that Julius is also included, so Claudia says that although his response makes her feel jealous, she already intended to include Julius, because she cannot reveal her secrets to anyone outside her team. Ayato sees Claudia's weapon glowing, and she asks if Ayato's experienced death before, then continues explaining she's experienced death over 1,000 times because her weapon forces its wielder to experience a different type of death in every dream. Claudia adds previous wielders never lasted 3 days with the weapon, and that is why no one has mastered its powerful future sight abilities. Ayato asks why she tolerates the weapon, and she says that she's managed to adapt to the horrific death experiences, but when he isn't satisfied with her explanation, Claudia explains that she needs it to achieve her dream. Ayato asks Claudia about her dream, but she tells him it's a secret, so he changes the topic to ask for her thoughts on Irene's ogre Lux instead. Claudia explains that every ogre Lux has its own personality, and that while his Sir Veresta is cooperative, Irene's Gravy Scythe seems particularly dangerous. Ayato thanks Claudia for the insight and is about to leave when she teases that he's more than welcome to sleep over, but Ayato is feeling too depressed to entertain any ideas, so she simply wishes him luck on his match tomorrow. Years ago in a war-torn region, Priscilla was crushed by the collapsed ceiling and was taken to the hospital, but she survived due to her dormant regenerative abilities. When news about Priscilla's abilities got out, some shady dudes paid off her parents to take her, but Irene took Priscilla and ran away from home. While they were homeless, Dirk showed up and gave Irene the Gravy Scythe Ogre Lux, and when she was able to unlock its powers, Dirk told Irene to ask for whatever she wants, in exchange for her power. On the day of the final match, Priscilla wakes her sister from her nightmare and reminds her that they will soon be called to the arena to fight, so Irene gets ready and says that they should go all out from the beginning. Irene sucks Priscilla's blood to enhance her strength, then the two girls embrace themselves one last time before heading to the arena. Meanwhile, Ayato shares a plan with Julius that he wants to try. Then while walking to the arena, Julius reminds Ayato that her goal is to win the competition regardless of her opponent. Julius adds that she has no preference on how she wins and will go with Ayato's plan because she has to consider her partner's wish. So Ayato thanks Julius for cooperating with her, and the partners walk into the arena. The crowd goes crazy as the commentators welcome the pairs to the ring. Then Julius activates her weapon and Ayato does his acting to release his constricting seal and activates his Serveresta. Irene powers up her Gravi Scythe and warns them that she'll be going all out, and the commentators kick off the match. Julius creates multiple fire discs and launches them toward Irene, but Irene blocks them and counters Ayato's sword attack. Then Ayato and Irene exchange intense blows in a close-range sword fight, but Irene soon notices that she can't keep up. Julius shoots more fire discs, while Ayato charges at the same time, but Irene evades the attacks. Then she commends their teamwork, and says that her power is also from her and Priscilla's teamwork. Irene tries to increase the gravity pull around Ayato, but he leaps away and instructs Julius to resume their coordinated attacks. But Irene covers herself and Priscilla with a powerful barrier and recharges herself with her sister's blood. While Irene feeds, Julius informs Ayato that her preparations for his plans are complete and it is time for him to try out his plan. So after Irene drops her barrier, Ayato looks at Priscilla's weakening state and asks Irene if her way of fighting is right, but Irene just tells him to shut up. Ayato asks her again, making Irene get pissed and send a gravity manipulating attack their way, but Ayato and Julius evade the attack. Julius distracts Irene by shooting fireballs behind her, while Ayato swoops in with his sword and Irene immediately counters his attack. However, Ayato surprises her with a double attack and knocks Irene off balance. Then he lands a clean strike targeting her Gravis Scythe, but it repels him and sends him flying towards the arena wall. With time running out, Julius and Ayato regroup and Irene creates multiple gravity balls and launches them at them. So Ayato instructs Julius to focus on defending herself before using a special sword skill to cut through every gravity ball that enters his range and charge toward Irene to distract her. Julius traps her with a location-based attack, but Irene destroys the trap spell and mocks her, so Julius reveals that it was just a decoy and activates another location-based attack that covers the entire ring and explodes. The smoke clears and Irene is somehow still standing because she covered herself in gravity balls. Then Priscilla tries to check on her sister, but she doesn't recognize the person standing in front of her. When Ayato tries to save Priscilla from the entity, it unleashes a gravity attack that pins everyone around her to the ground, and they watch Irene suck her sister's blood. Ayato tells Julius that the Gravis Scythe has taken over Irene's mind, and they have to save Priscilla before it's too late, so Ayato slowly drags himself across the gravity-spiked ring and tries to talk sense into Irene. Irene regains her senses for a few seconds before bursting out in screams and releasing gravity waves all over the ring, as the Gravis Scythe starts to completely take over Irene. Ayato suddenly feels information from his Serveresta flowing into him, and with a smile on his face, remarks that he doesn't like being tested and truly lifts the constricting seal on himself. Ayato pushes through the waves and lands a powerful attack that knocks the Gravis Scythe from Irene's grip. Then Ayato follows up with multiple attacks until he completely shatters it. After Ayato destroys the Gravis Scythe, Irene is released from its control and passes out, and after being declared the winner, Ayato falls to the ground in pain. Dirk, who has been watching the match from his office, looks unsurprised by the result, but Ayato starts screaming in pain and some chains materialize around him. Dirk deduces that Ayato must only be able to temporarily lift his seal, but decides to be careful, knowing who his sister is. Then he complains about his pending dealings with Ernesta and wonders how the powers from other academies will react. As the Festa battle comes to an end, several individuals from other school councils start to take notice of Ayato, and Ernesta and Camilla get excited over their new discovery. Camilla mentions if he can only lift his seal for 5 minutes, then their puppets can easily hold him off for that long, but Ernesta tells her that there's still a lot more for them to see. Priscilla wakes up in the infirmary and sees Irene, who apologizes for drinking too much of her blood. Then Irene informs Priscilla that they had lost the match and Ayato had destroyed her Gravis Scythe. Priscilla asks how Dirk reacted to the Gravis Scythe, but Irene says that he surprisingly did nothing, so Priscilla asks her sister to teach her how to become strong enough to protect herself, and Irene happily agrees. On the other hand, Julius scolds Ayato for exposing his actual seal power to the world and almost destroying his body, and Ayato reminds Julius of his promise to always be there for her. Ayato tells her that if they want to find a way forward, then they have to find a way to break the constricting seal. Julius holds Ayato's face and reminds him they're partners in everything, and just as she is about to kiss him, the rest of the girls burst into the room to check up on him. Claudia, Sakamiya, and Kieran. While Ayato's harem starts arguing over who is going to be his stepmommy nurse, Yabuki just listens at the entrance, wondering how this situation will turn out. That's the end of today's video. if you stayed until now, comment down below red cheeks, give me 5k likes, and I'll post unplotted and subscribe to the channel if you want to see another recap like this. Peace.